Usually when we look at an instruction manual, there's this expectation of it being completely dry and utilitarian.
Right, like assembling a piece of flat pack furniture or
Right,
something.
exactly. You look at the schematic, you see the diagram, and the manual just mechanically tells you, insert peg A into slot B. It's totally detached process, right? It's designed to be entirely devoid of emotion.
Yeah, it's purely functional. I mean, you are just following an algorithm to achieve a physical result. There's no internal transformation required whatsoever.
But what if the instruction manual wasn't for putting together a bookshelf? What if it was like a blueprint for building a bridge to the divine?
Now, that is a huge shift.
And what if instead of hex keys and particle board, the building materials were blood, fire, smoke, fine flour, and salt?
Yeah, that changes the paradigm entirely. You move from this detached mechanical process to a deep, visceral, highly sensory experience. And when we look at the source material for today's deep dive,
Which is a direct translation of the book of Leviticus, specifically the first 3 chapters, for those of you listening.
right, exactly. That is exactly what we are dealing with. On its surface, for a modern reader, it can look like an ancient, really gruesome butcher's manual. I mean, it is just full of slaughtering, dashing of blood, and separating out fat.
It can feel completely alien to us. But the mission of this deep dive isn't to get bogged down in the culture shock, right? We are going to dig into the profound psychology underneath these rituals.
Which is fascinating, by the way.
It really is. Because we're going to look at how ancient people processed incredibly complex emotions like guilt, gratitude, the need for connection, and how they translated those into physical actions.
Yes, and we will systematically organize all of this for you. We'll walk through the animal offerings, contrast them with the grain offerings, and look at the step-by-step reality of what it actually took to approach the divine.
So to do that properly, we have to start with the worshiper's mindset before they even, leave their house.
Right, and the text introduces a foundational Hebrew concept right at the beginning. The word is korban.
Korban.
Yeah, and this is typically translated into English as offering or sacrifice. But the root of the word karav actually means to draw near or to bring close.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's a relational word, not a transactional one.
Exactly.
It's not about giving something up just to suffer a loss. It's about giving something to, close a gap.
That is a perfect way to put it, but the text is incredibly demanding about what you use to close that gap. It mandates that when a person brings a korban, it must be from their own cattle, their own herd, or their own flock.
Right. You can't just find a stray animal.
No, and if you are bringing an animal for a burnt offering, it has to be a male without blemish.
Without blemish, which I imagine goes far beyond just ancient quality control, right?
Oh, way beyond. We have to place ourselves in the historical background of an ancient agrarian society. An unblemished male animal is prime capital.
It's like your savings account.
Basically, yeah, it is your absolute best genetic stock for breeding. It represents future wealth, future food, future security. So by demanding physical perfection, the system forces the worshiper into a state of deep intentionality.
So you can't just scan your flock for the sickly sheep with a limp that was probably going to die before winter anyway.
Exactly. You have to make a conscious, deeply costly choice.
You are auditing your livelihood and pulling out your most valuable asset. So let's put you, the listener, right into this scenario. Imagine you have made that costly choice. You bring this valuable animal through the camp to the door of the tent of meeting.
And we should clarify what that actually is.
Yeah.
In this context, the tent of meeting is the portable tabernacle out in the desert. It's the terrifying, holy epicenter of the divine presence on earth.
You walk up to this nexus point, and then there's this incredibly crucial moment. The text says you must lay your hand upon the head of the offering.
Yes.
And it explicitly states this is so it will be accepted for him to make atonement for him.
This is where the ritual moves from a simple economic transaction to a profound psychological identification.
It feels intensely personal. I mean, this isn't like dropping a check in a donation bin or, paying a modern tax where you just hand something over and walk away.
Not at all.
Think about the physical reality of pressing your weight onto a living, breathing creature. You feel its warmth, its pulse. It's like physically signing a contract, but instead of ink on paper.
You are transferring your identity, your intent, and your need for atonement onto this animal.
It is a visceral moment of accountability.
It really is. The text establishes early on that this entire system is about substitution. The laying on of hands communicates a stark reality, basically saying, this animal represents me.
Wow.
Right. What happens to it in the next few minutes is a substitute for the consequences of my own flaws and failures. It is the necessary bridge between human imperfection and divine holiness.
Okay, so once that intimate connection is made, the human psychological need for total atonement just kicks the procedure into high gear.
It does.
And this brings us to the first and most dramatic sacrifice detailed in Leviticus chapter 1, the burnt offering, or in Hebrew, the olah.
Yes, the olah. And the word olah literally translates to that which goes up or ascends.
Ascends, okay.
Yeah, that name is the ultimate clue to its function and its dramatic visual result.
Let's walk through the step-by-step flow here, because this is wild. You've brought your unblemished bull to the door. You've laid your hand heavily on its head. Now, the text details something that genuinely shocked me.
Ah, I know what you're going to say.
You, the everyday worshiper, are the one who kills the bullock before the Lord. The priest doesn't do it for you.
Nope, you have to hold the knife.
That is intense.
It is. The worshiper is entirely active in this process. You don't get to outsource the heavy, violent reality of atonement to a professional.
So you kill the animal. Then, Aaron's sons, the designated priesthood who handle the mechanics of the altar, they step in. They catch the blood and dash it completely around the altar.
But your job still isn't done.
Right. The text says you then flay the animal, meaning you skin a massive bull yourself, and you butcher it, cutting it into pieces.
Which is exhausting work.
Exactly. And while you are doing this bloody work, the priests are arranging the fire and the wood. You wash the inwards and the legs with water to ensure absolute ritual purity.
And finally, the priest takes every single piece of that animal and makes the entire thing smoke on the altar.
It is entirely consumed by the fire?
Completely.
No.
Nothing is left.
Okay, I have to pause here and challenge the underlying logic of this system.
Go for it.
If I am an ancient Israelite, I know that food is scarce. Meat is a rare luxury, usually reserved for massive festivals. Taking a prime, unblemished bull, butchering it, and then turning the entire thing into ash seems like a massive, catastrophic waste of resources.
It sounds crazy to us today.
Right. Economically, burying your best capital in a fire makes absolutely no sense. Why require total destruction?
Well, from a purely utilitarian economic standpoint, you're right, it is a devastating loss. But we have to ask, what is the currency being exchanged here? The text explains the underlying mechanism using a very specific recurring phrase. It calls the olah an offering made by fire, of a sweet savor unto the Lord.
A sweet savor.
Exactly. Unlike the other offerings we will explore later, nothing is left for humans to eat. Not the worshiper, not the priests. The olah represents total, uncompromising surrender.
So the smoke ascending is like a physical, visual representation of the worshiper's entire self being offered to the divine.
Yes, you burn the whole thing precisely because it hurts economically. The severity of the loss is the point.
Oh, wow.
It is the worshiper declaring, my dedication to this relationship supersedes my physical needs and my wealth.
But wait, if the severity of the loss is the point, this starts sounding like an elite religion. Like, if total surrender requires burning a prime bull, what happens to the ancient poor?
That's a great question.
If doing this would literally starve your family, do you just have no access to the divine?
The text actually anticipates that exact structural critique, and it's surprisingly adaptable. Chapter 1 doesn't rigidly mandate bulls. It cascades down the socioeconomic ladder.
Oh, really?
Yeah. If you can't afford an animal from the herd, you can bring from the flock, so a sheep or a goat. And if you are truly destitute, the text provides another path entirely.
Which is?
You can bring fowls, specifically turtle doves or young pigeons.
Okay, so birds.
Right. Now, the mechanical procedure shifts slightly. The priest pinches off the bird's head and drains the blood at the side of the altar, but the theological result is identical. It is entirely burned, and it is still called a sweet savor.
That's brilliant. So the system is designed so that every single person, regardless of their bank account, has equal access to the act of total dedication.
Exactly. That dramatically shifts how we view the olah, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's about the posture of the heart, scaled to your reality.
It really does. Now, the olah addresses the human need for total dramatic atonement and surrender. But human relationships, including the one with the divine, also require daily, ongoing maintenance.
They do.
So what if you want to demonstrate your dedication, but you are offering the daily fruits of your labor rather than an animal? This brings us to a conceptual pivot in Leviticus chapter 2.
Yes. We move from the bloody livestock pens to the fields and the kitchen. This is the mincha.
Mincha, which is commonly translated as the meal offering or grain offering, right?
That's correct.
And the text details that the mincha consists of fine flour, oil, and frankincense. And the culinary variety here is honestly fascinating to me.
How so?
Well, you can bring it raw, just flour and oil, or you can bake it in an oven as unleavened cakes. You can cook it on a flat griddle or even prepare it in a stewing pan.
It really meets the worshiper right in the middle of their daily domestic life.
It does. But when you bring it to the tent of meeting, the procedure is a massive departure from the animal sacrifice.
The underlying mechanism of consumption changes completely here.
Because with the animal in the ola, the whole thing went up in smoke. With the mincha, the priest only takes a handful of the fine flour and oil, along with all of the frankincense.
Just a handful.
Right. He burns just that handful on the altar, as what the text calls a memorial part. And the text then dictates that the remnant belongs to Aaron and his sons to eat as a thing most holy.
It's quite the shift.
I look at this like an ancient royal tribute, you know. The king, the divine presence, gets the symbolic, highly aromatic first bite, that handful with the fragrant frankincense going up in smoke. But the local administration, the priests, are practically sustained by the rest of the bread.
It is a highly practical system of provision. Aaron's sons, the priesthood, they dedicate their entire lives to the service of the tent of meeting. They do not receive tribal land allotments to farm for themselves.
Right, they can't grow their own food.
Exactly. They rely entirely on the community for survival. So the mincha creates a sacred economy where demonstrating devotion to God simultaneously feeds the spiritual workers.
But the text puts incredibly strict guardrails on this baked provision. It explicitly demands absolutely no leaven, meaning no yeast, and no honey are allowed to be burned on the altar.
Yes, strict prohibition.
I really need to understand the why here. If you are baking bread for a royal tribute, why ban yeast and honey, which, let's be honest, make bread taste significantly better?
To understand the prohibition, we have to look at the mandate that actually accompanies it. The text explicitly states that every single meal offering must include salt.
Oh, salt.
Yes, it uses a powerful permanent phrase. It calls it the salt of the covenant of thy God. It commands, with all thy offerings thou shalt offer salt.
So salt is the non-negotiable ingredient.
Always.
Yeah.
And if we analyze the symbolic chemistry here, the reason is brilliant. Consider what yeast and honey actually do.
Okay.
In the ancient world, yeast works through fermentation, which is essentially a controlled form of decay and corruption. It puffs things up.
And honey.
Honey, while sweet, ferments incredibly easily and was often heavily associated with surrounding pagan rituals. They represent things that swell, sour, and eventually rot.
Oh, I see.
Right. And salt does the exact opposite. Salt preserves. It stops decay in its tracks. It is enduring.
Wow, okay. So this bloodless grain offering represents a totally different facet of the religious experience compared to the intense, fiery surrender of the Ola.
Precisely.
The mincha represents a daily, enduring, preserved relationship with the divine. It's the active daily maintenance of the covenant, kept free from decay.
It is a profound statement that devotion isn't just about dramatic moments of bloody sacrifice. It is also about the quiet, preserved consistency of daily life.
That's beautiful. So we've explored the need for total personal atonement and the need for daily, ongoing maintenance of the relationship. But human beings also have a deep psychological need for communal celebration and fellowship.
We do. We are social creatures.
Exactly. And that brings us to the third major offering detailed in chapter 3, which brings the worshiper themselves directly into the consumption process.
This is the shalomim, translated as the peace offering.
Shalomim.
Yes, and the root word is connected to shalom, which encompasses peace, wholeness, completion, and well-being.
The entry rules shift again here, too. Unlike the burnt offering, which demanded a male, the animal for the shalomim can be male or female, though it still must be without blemish.
Right, but the initial procedure mirrors the ola.
Yeah, you bring the animal, lay your hands on it to transfer intent, you slaughter it, and the priests dash the blood. But the knife work that follows completely diverges.
You are no longer preparing the entire animal for the fire.
You perform a very specific surgical separation. The text details that the worshiper removes only the fat covering the inwards, the kidneys and their surrounding fat, and the lobe above the liver.
Very specific parts.
Only these specific portions are handed over to the priests to be burned on the altar as a sweet savor. So why just the internal fat and kidneys?
We have to view this through the lens of ancient dietary reality.
Yeah.
Today, we might trim the fat off a steak for health reasons.
Sure.
But in an ancient agrarian world where starvation is a constant threat and meat is rare, fat is life.
Ah, because of the calories.
Exactly. Fat is the most calorie-dense, energy-rich, and highly prized element of the animal. It represents the absolute best, the richest part. Therefore, the absolute best is reserved exclusively for the divine.
That makes perfect sense of the ancient mindset. You give the richest part to the fire. But a cow or a sheep has an enormous amount of meat left after you scoop out the kidneys and the inner fat.
A lot of meat.
Right. So we have to pull in some context from slightly later in Leviticus, specifically chapter 7, to see the rest of the picture. Chapter 7 notes that the breast and the right thigh of the animal are waved and given to the priests as their portion.
Yes.
But the vast majority of the meat, the roasts, the ribs, the flanks, is given right back to the worshiper. And the text commands them to eat it, either on the same day or the next day, while maintaining ritual purity.
The dynamic completely shifts here from a vertical transaction between human and God to a horizontal community event.
It essentially becomes an ancient sacred barbecue.
That's exactly what it is.
Think about the logistics. You cannot eat an entire cow by yourself in 2 days before the meat spoils in the desert heat. The ticking clock forces you to invite your family, your friends, and your neighbors. The sacrifice becomes a feast.
It represents a profound psychological and communal arrival. Think about the shared reality of the shalom.
Okay.
The absolute richest parts, the fat, are given to the divine fire. The officiating priests receive their designated cuts, sustaining their work. And the worshiper takes the rest home to host a massive gathering. All three parties, God, the priest, and the worshiper, are symbolically sharing a meal from the exact same sacrifice.
They are literally sitting at the same table.
That's you.
Yeah.
In the ancient Near East, sharing a meal was the ultimate sign of a treaty, of deep friendship, and of non-hostility. You don't eat with your enemies.
True.
The Shalomim represents peace, thanksgiving, and restored fellowship. You have brought your offering, atonement has been made through the blood, the covenant is preserved with the salt, and now you sit down and eat in the presence of the divine in your community. It is the ultimate celebration of wholeness.
Man. So to bring this all together for you listening today, we started with a text that, on its face, looked like a dry, bloody, intimidating list of butcher's rules.
It really did.
But these sources reveal a highly organized, deeply intentional system for processing human existence. You have the total, smoky surrender and dedication of the Olah. You have the bloodless, preserving daily provision of the Mincha. And you have the joyous, shared fellowship of the Shalomim.
And throughout all of it, the ancient worshiper didn't just stand back and watch a religious performance. They were deeply, actively involved.
Very active.
They audited their livelihood to select the unblemished animal. They laid their own hands on it to transfer their intent. They held the knife. They participated in the visceral reality of making things right. It was a full-body sensory commitment to the relationship.
Which is exactly why this matters to a modern learner. Far from being a dry instruction manual, these chapters are a deeply psychological blueprint. They show us how ancient people processed incredibly complex human emotions, like how they dealt with the heavy burden of their own guilt, how they expressed overwhelming gratitude, and how they intentionally built community provision and fellowship. It's a blueprint for maintaining connection.
It acknowledges that building any meaningful connection, whether with the divine or with the people around you, requires tangible cost, deep intentionality, and active participation.
Which leads us to a final, provocative thought to mull over based on these ancient texts. When we were analyzing the meal offering, the mincha, we noted that God commanded that every offering must include the salt of the covenant.
The non-negotiable ingredient.
Right. You could change how you baked the flour, you could bring different amounts based on your wealth, but the salt could never be omitted because salt preserves, while things like yeast and honey inevitably ferment and decay over time. The salt was the non-negotiable preserver of the relationship.
It keeps things from rotting.
Exactly. So think about your own life. Think about your own commitments and your own relationships today. Whether it's a marriage, a friendship, a career, or a personal goal. Relationships naturally tend toward decay if left alone. They sour, they drift, they ferment under the surface.
They require maintenance.
So what is your salt? What is the active, preserving ingredient you intentionally add to your life to keep your promises from decaying over time? We started by talking about blueprints and instruction manuals. Next time you are looking to build or repair a connection, ask yourself, are you just passively following dry steps, or are you bringing the fire, the intentionality, and the salt?